Two minutes, everyone. One minute. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tablelands Regional Council Ordinary Meeting for March. As you've probably gathered, due to COVID matters, I'm a close contact, so I'm unable to be there in person today. So I'll do my best to manage things here on the screen. So welcome, everyone. Could I just remind everyone to turn off their devices? Do we have apologies? Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Good, thank you. All right, no apologies. Could I ask everyone to stand, please? I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we work and live and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also, while we're standing, could we please observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect for members of our community who have recently passed. We wish their family and friends peace and comfort during this challenging time. Thank you. You can be seated. Item number 6, declaration of any material personal interests / conflicts of interest by councillors or senior council officers. Any conflicts?
No.
No. Thank you. Item 7, confirmation of the minutes. Can we have a mover and seconder for the minutes of the February meeting? Councillor Wilts and Councillor Hodge. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item number 8, business arising actions out of the minutes of the previous meeting. Do we have information on the screen there?
Yep.
Yeah. So I can't see that screen, but if we have any councillors need to clarify a comment on what's on that screen.
Happy with this. Happy. It's about a question I raised, Rod, and I'm happy with the response.
Okay. Thank you. Any other matters or actions arising from the minutes? Okay, thank you. Rightio, item 9, we have our deputations. Could I invite Matt Andrzejczyk to come up and talk about the Tolga Hotel? Thank you. Sorry, Matt Andrzejczyk is from Freshwater Planning. Thanks, Matt. Please come up and take a seat, and we'll welcome, and we'll hand over to you. And if you'd like to introduce your colleague, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors and council officers. Thank you for the opportunity to make deputations today in relation to item 31.6, the Cyclist Rail Trail. This is Dane Ingram, who is the senior architect at Clark and Pritz, and I'm going to send it over to him to start and talk about the development.
Thanks, everyone. Not really sure how to start with, just probably more of a historical sort of journey that we've taken, given the fact we've got a short amount of time. We've had 18 months to sort of get to where we are at the moment. When Tom purchased the hotel on behalf of the Far North Hotels Group, it had an inherited problem with patrons moving out onto the main road. And that was one of the major design sort of considerations that we had, and that's where the discussions with councils, planners commenced. We looked at ways of designing barriers to the front road and other sort of implementations to keep them from travelling out, especially on race days. And it was decided that we'd try and bring the patron to the rear of the property, and that's what then transformed into the design that we've got at the moment, making sure that there was an appropriate amenity out the back. With the covered area that was there, that then also triggered off a couple of other town planning issues relating to car parking, and those discussions then ensued with planning, and it was, and I think Matt will talk to the legal side of things, that it was determined that we'd have discussions around the lease and then establishing car parking, which was considered to the town planning, and that's how we've ended up with the parking that's there. There is additional car parking to the number that was for the area of the additional, but we also had to then make the car parking also cover the area that was already associated with the areas of the hotel that was there as well. That puts us to where we are with the car parking itself, and the car parking is determined obviously by the Australian standards and circulation requirements. Formalising these car parking has also then helped with the issues with conflict between traffic and pedestrians. Now, I'm an avid cyclist as well. I'm Australian National Champion of 2018. I'm also the Director of Tour of Tropics, which brings around 800 people every year to the Tablelands region. And councils, I've discussed most who are affected by that event. So we're not inconsiderate to the likes and the plight of the rail trail itself. Thus, while we've been protected the rail trail's location, and then where we have had to deviate, we've pulled all the car parking in, so it's not touching the actual trail, but we are looking to show a wider rail trail down that boundary so that it then preserves the access. Now, noted by some other deputations that were presented to us or presented to councillors, and we got a copy of that presentation. It is recognised as a bit of a trailhead for the Audax riding. I'm not too sure if Tom's been a part of that at the hotel at the moment, if any of those events have been held. But with those events, they do come with vehicles, and any trailhead to any park, or bike park, mountain bike park, or anywhere, typically needs to formalise some car parking because they leave their vehicles there and then move on to where else they go. Now, I've been across many bike parks around the region and interstate, and they all have similar sort of attributes. Now, one of the considerations that Tom's done in lieu of the rail trail and the car parking is the amenity of the hotel has been considered as well. So there's access to his amenities, which are there because at 8 o'clock in the morning when the Audax assemble, I don't believe that patroning his hotel to buy alcohol or food. So there's an amenity access there to be able to use bathrooms, which is also an attribute to the area as well, given that there's no facilities around there, and I understand that the riding bodies are looking for support in way of grants to build such facilities. That's actually happening by default with this. So where it comes down to is the lease that Matt will talk to a little bit after was it's a sublease from council, as everyone knows, it's a sublease to council from DTMR. DTMR supported it. We ended up having conversations with them at the advice of council to start off with, to be endorsing the ideas that we put forward. That's then been handed back to the town planning. Town planning will also, as I say, it's a 12 months journey to get to where we are. And design has taken and acknowledged nearly every step, I'd say every step, and if not more, as we've been requested to, whether it's acoustic studies or traffic studies, all of those things have been adhered to, and Tom's put his hand in his pocket to facilitate that. Now, we all recognise that Tom's a large developer in the area as well. He's doing most of the stuff that he does is altruistic. There's obviously a commercial venture for all of it, but I don't think he needs to really do half the stuff that he does. Most of it's to employ a mate or along those lines. And reluctantly, he's here. He doesn't like to be in the limelight. That's why he's putting us forward to talk about his development. I think, in summary, that's really the journey was that we've been guided by town planning advice and the planners themselves to get where we are, and that's what we've negotiated the size of the lease as well. So it is in conformance with the Australian standards and the town plan.
I guess my sort of aspect today is to talk about the agenda report and to be upfront and honest, and councillors have asked me to be upfront and honest. So in doing that, I'd like to start by saying that I'm extremely disappointed in council and the agenda item. I'm disappointed that the agenda item is so one-sided. While the report does surrender the sublease as a request and requirement, and the process we've been over for the last 18 months, however, the body of the report does not reflect the recommendation. The report includes images of bike riders, which are taken from, my understanding, the Toro submission, the PowerPoint presentation, and other submissions there. However, the Town Planning Department contacted us at our expense to go and undertake additional survey, additional perspective drawings and all this, particularly for this agenda item, to help make it clear in the amenity and what's proposing in the plan and all that. And however, to that degree, whether you believe it's one-sided or not, one of the 3 plans were put in the report, and the 2 prospective plans that demonstrate the whole amenity of this thing weren't provided. So we've got a copy here today for the councillors, and we'll circulate them. And again, this was done at the expense, the additional expense, continuing expense at the client, based on the council's request. Further to this, I'm disappointed this made at council's airtime that they've given to the submitters and the complainants. In relation to the DA, it's I guess from a consultant point of view, it's quite upsetting. Now, I've had meetings with councillors that have told me in the last couple of months that we're all sitting down here and we're working for distance. grow the business, we're happy to support development, support local youth. Unfortunately, that doesn't come across in this process. There was a PowerPoint presentation provided by my standing by the Tora Group to councillors. Now, the consultants weren't invited to this, nor are we allowed to provide evidence or ever provided any of this in the matter. Why they were given so much airtime and a PowerPoint presentation was provided during the middle of the application is beyond me. Again, it seems to be unfair from our point of view that we were never contacted or discussed or had the opportunity or even invited to this. In addition to that, the planning manager, the managers of council extended that we extend the public notification period for additional days, as they were under some pressure for additional groups to provide submissions.
Excuse me, could you just explain that if you don't mind? What do you mean by that?
So basically, when we advertise the development application, we're required under the Sustainable Planning Act to advertise for 15 business days. Now, Freshwater Planning always advertises for a minimum of 17 to 18, and that has a long history in terms of errors made in the paper and bits and pieces, not to try and do it so that we're clear and concise and open for everything. In addition, the advertising was provided over the Christmas period. Now, no consultant ever wants to advertise over the Christmas period. I understand some of the submissions mentioned that they did it over this Christmas period to try and hide things. That's further from any truth. As I said before, no consultant would ever advertise over the Christmas period because the times between the 20th of December and the 5th of January, which is effectively 16 days, is unable to be counted. And we got advice from both council and from the state government that within that 16-day period, from the 20th of December to that, we can take the signs down. Now, again, we don't want to advertise over that period because what happens is there's more people around, there's more tourists around, and people are on holidays, therefore they have more time to write submissions. So from a consultant point of view, you always want to try and finish before the 20th of December. Now, it was a request of council's planning officers that we keep the signs up over that period, which was against the advice we were given, but it was a request to them so that it wouldn't confuse the already angered submitters. And so, against the applicant's best wishes, I kept the signs up over that Christmas period to appease council's officers. I guess from my point of view, it's been sort of a difficult road for us. We've been very helpful with the planning department and there to progress this application, and it has been nearly 18 months. But in top of that, extensions for the requesting the referral period, the PowerPoint presentation that was provided, which again, I believe was inappropriately given airtime, was then asked to be provided as a submission, even though it was provided outside the advertising period, which Freshwater Planning disagreed to. And I guess then we've had discussions with managers that have basically turned around and told us that if Tom would provide infrastructure to the riders, that this may appease some of the submitters. And there's been a number of, I guess, information provided to the representatives and all different groups come from council, which I understand to be a certain management position that is meant to be seen to be sitting on the fence and fair, and yet from all dealings and understandings that I have had, they do not seem to be that. It seems to be well swayed towards the submitters, which makes my job difficult.
If I may, can you just can you go through that point again about your saying that
my understanding
senior officers have been displaying favouritism in this matter?
My understanding is that there is management within council, certain departments that are meant to be sitting. My understanding is council meant to be on the fence and be fair either way. However, all the bits and pieces and discussions and things that I've been informed of is that it seems to be very one-sided. Information is being provided willy-nilly to all these other submitters, and it doesn't seem to be, and it seems to be much of a one-sided affair, and that's provided by what I'm informed to be a management department within council.
I'll take that up with you separately, Matt.
On top of that, I've had a number of calls from the planning managers that have talked about the submissions, and I, on multiple occasions, have made my number available and made myself available that if any members of certain groups like the Torah or the Stayers or that, my number was there, past the council available for anyone to contact me to discuss any of the submissions or any development. And to this date, Freshwater Planning's had no contact from any of the groups. In addition to this, the very active submitter group has managed to wrangle the ministers involved. And not only have they had the ministers for both the Department of Transport and Main Roads, they've also had the minister involved for the SLAMS department, the government department, and of which have both come back to me. And both ministers that have been contacted and the departments have come back to no avail, because every process that we've undertaken is clear, concise, and has been done correctly. So to me, I guess it's just hard that we're here, council that's open for development, and yet the submitters have given so much airtime to the point that the developers haven't. I guess I have to talk about the report now. Again, it's up for the giving up of the sublease. However, in the report it states a number of conditions. Now the conditions are Roman numeral 3, talks about that council won't approve the release of the sublease unless an MCU is provided over the site. While I understand this and this condition could possibly be acceptable, it would be acceptable if the MCU directly followed this current agenda item. Unfortunately for us, as the MCU is tabled to go to, at the moment, the April meeting, if the sublease surrender goes through today, the town planning officers would prefer that the tenure be resolved prior to the MCU. And at the moment, we currently have a signed lease agreement with the Department of Transport and Main Roads on the 16th of December. They got provided the final plan in early January, and literally they're just waiting on council's removal of the sublease, surrender of the sublease, for us to then take up that lease. So the condition Roman numeral 3, us requiring an MCU, means that we can't affect this sublease until the approval's done, whereas if the sublease gets through today, we can have that all decided prior to the meeting, the MCU, of which is what town planning's consideration and confirmed, and also makes it, I guess, more certain in the approach to go forward. I understand clause 4, Romans 4, is being reworded. We have not been provided the new words, but unfortunately it is being poorly written. And it basically outlines that all the planning conditions are required to be completed prior to council surrendering their sublease. Now, I understand this was not the intention of the clause, and that the clause was meant to mean something else. Unfortunately, the way it's being poorly written is the fact that basically the development has to go and do all the requirements, the conditions, put all the infrastructure down on land that is not provided any tenure over, or do they have any tenure over, and then again can be held at gunpoint by council as to whether or not they can surrender their lease. So
just excuse me if you don't mind, but an example would be if you have to put the bitumen service down on all the car parking, you have to do that before council
even surrender their sublease. So we are then providing infrastructure and stuff on a DTMR owned land that council has a sublease that we have no tenure to, in the hope that council will do the right thing eventually once this is done and then surrender their sublease, so then we can enter into a lease with TMR. And
through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll address that when we speak to the report. Thanks, Matt.
Perfect. I guess on the lease, the items of the lease, I guess the main point I need to point out is the fact that the site is owned by the state of Queensland and it is governed by the Department of Transport and Main Road. Council then has a sublease over this parcel of the land, and the sublease is for the multi-purpose recreational transport. So I know there have been discussions and a few comments made by the councillors that they would prefer to see a sublease over this so that council can protect the interests. My understanding of how things lease works and all that is that council only have a sublease, so they are only privy to the requirements of the sublease, and that any change to, if we were to look at sublease, would then have to change those requirements. So whilst it is owned by the Department of Transport and Main Roads and council has a sublease on it, they only have a sublease for the use of the rail trail, not for any other purpose. So effectively the sublease has no control of the land. That control solely comes to the Department of Main Roads. Now, the application was required to get consent from the SLAMS department and the Department of Transport and Main Roads, which has been provided. In addition to that, the Department of Transport and Main Roads made some comments on it in relation to the bypass, and at this stage, no one's come back with any comments, because what Tom is proposing to do fits in line with the plan for the Atherton bypass. I guess at the end of the day, in terms of the lease, we were directed this way by council's officers. So council have come to us, we talked about a sublease originally, it then went through the process, council's legal department turned around and said, a sublease is not appropriate, so what we're going to do is we're going to withdraw. If you get it all sorted out and agreed upon, we'll withdraw our partial part of the lease, and at that stage then you'll deal directly with TMR. I believe that's written in the report. Council is there. So we've followed all these steps that council have provided to us and suggested the pathways, and we've, again, to be sort of hit up at the 11th hour and say that this could be going a pear-shaped from an 18-month process is very hard to swallow, and I guess difficult to see. I also understand that the sublease that council are looking to possibly reduce the width of the sublease, and for them and for us to get a sublease on council sublease, I think there is a fair few issues with that. As Damien pointed out, the sublease has been designed appropriately to fit in the Australian standards of car parking, and also at the request of council, extra to provide landscaping and fencing. So that's where the extra width comes from. One of the submitters said that the rail trail frontage is the existing formalised problem that we have with the encroachment of the hotel is encroaching 12.5 metres, and that Tom effectively is trying to provide a sublease of 13.9. So to me, the difference is minimal, and as you can see, it's appropriately shown on those perspective plans that we've been given. I guess a point that was made that we want to brought forward to the attention of the council is IGA in Atherton is a commercial building, commercial development that services and supports the local community of Atherton. They actually have closed down a significant part of the rail trail for the expansion of car parking and the likes, and the car parking beyond that, the rail trail beyond that is only 10 metres wide. So I guess all things showing, whilst the site we're trying to get the sublease on is 30 metres wide, and I don't understand why a 2-metre path can't be fit within the remaining 16 metres when there's precedent set and other issues provided within Atherton.
IGA haven't closed down any part of the rail.
Yep.
Hang on a minute.
There's a deputation, it's not a public question, Tom, thank you.
So there is some Queensland Globe images demonstrating that part of the.
Is it time?
Yeah,
That's that part of the lease handover.
yeah, Matt, it's the mayor here. Just how are you going on your schedule? Because we have run over time.
Yep. So we'll provide that around. That's the IGA, which provides a significant contribution to the community, similar to what the Solga Hotel is proposing to do. I guess in summary, I am thankful for the council's report and their concerns in relation to this item. This process for the sublease has been long and drawn out, and it has been provided as a part of the request from council and the direction from council. So we're here today to hope that gets put through. All
right. Thank you, Matt. Look, I'm I'm concerned about those allegations that you raised, and I'm sure that the CEO, as he said, will follow through with those inquiries. I'd like to say though, it's councillors' duty and councillors' prerogative to speak to the community in a very close way, and the councillors have done that. So I do have some concerns that you're afraid that councillors are giving favouritism. Councillors are doing their job. Later on today, we're going to have to make a decision, and the decision will rest on the councillors, and that's a responsibility that we take very seriously. So, look, I'm disappointed you feel that way, but I'd like to think our councillors are actually doing their job and doing their homework and talking to a lot of people. All right, thanks Matt, thanks Dave, thanks very much. Could I call Gail Stitcher up, please? Are you by yourself today, Gail?
I am.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Gail. I'll hand over to you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, councillors, officers of council, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to present this deputation today. I'm appearing today, yes, I am a member of Tora, but I'm appearing simply as a community member of the Tablelands. It appears in this matter I've acquired something of a spokesperson status. It's definitely not a role I'm enjoying. I became aware of this application on the 17th of January. Given that I've worked for the past several years very closely to learn what's happening within council and within our community regarding cycling and trail use, it was a little disappointing to find out that this had been in train for quite a long time before the community became aware of it. So can I preface my comments by saying I have worked very hard since then to speak to as many community members as I can, local businesses, members of council, members of TMR, to try and learn what's happening. It's been pointed out to me, often forcefully, that in some matters I've got attributions of who did what, where, when incorrect, and I apologise unreservedly for that. I've said quite clearly that in those I am very happy to hear information to the contrary and happy to stand corrected. What I'd like to present to you today is the concerns of the community. The community concerns, from what I can hear, fall roughly into three areas. There's concerns about the development itself, there's concerns about the process that's been undertaken, and there's concerns about what this all means future directions, both for this development and for future applications. You'll see a lot of photos of cyclists at Tolga Pub. Can I please say to the applicants, we are not anti-pub. We're definitely not anti-Tolga Pub. We are not the enemy. We use this pub a lot. We had very, very good relationships with the previous publicans, and yes, we use their toilets before their opening hours. Our concerns with the land area. Within the application, it said that it was to formalise an existing and historic arrangement. And I noticed that within the TRC officer's report, it said it was going to regularise an existing encroachment. Regularise is where something is brought into formality that had been previously existed on a temporary basis. We dispute that this either formalises or regularises something that was existing. Our previous discussions with council officers show that there's no documentation of the previous encroachment with TRC. There is no history of any fees, permits, rates, or anything, any formality of the encroachment that was held by Tolga Pub. We've gone back through both Q globe imagery and Q imagery to see what's happening. There's no evidence prior to 2021 that the back half of the encroachment was used, and you can see quite well on these photos that the encroachment was bounded by rail barriers that were used, and down the back of the encroachment it was some rail corbels, the big chunks of timber that are used. Prior to mid-2021, it looked like this, well used by locals, not just for riding or walking through, but for other activities. There were those rail lines used as barriers, rail corbels, a very solid trail surface. Then there was a 1 to 2 metre grassed area between the trail and the gravel car park. The encroachment narrowed just past the big old poinciana tree, about 75 metres from the frontage, and it went into an open grassed area that was not used by vehicles. Now I ran some rough measures over the cube lobe imagery. The previous encroachment went to the full length of the rail. It was about 12.5 metres at the front. It varied between 2 and 5 metres at the rear. The corbels were a little wobbly. Based on my calculations, the previous encroachment was about 1,137 square metres. The total area of the hotel land was about 2,018 square metres, so the encroachment that was existing added an extra 56% of land area to the Tolga Hotel. No fees, no permits, no rates. So we disputed with council officers that this was going to formalise an existing and historic arrangement, because there was no arrangement. Based on the development application, the size of the applicant was 14.7 metres by the entire 106 metres of rail. It went almost 2 metres beyond the previous boundary rails and 10 to 12 metres beyond the corbels. Again, my calculations, 1,479 square metres, so that's 73% addition to the land area of the hotel. That's almost 350 square metres larger than the previous encroachment. But despite this, we were told that there would be no change to the existing rail trail. There was going to be no impact on drainage, no impact on the trail formation, and therefore no need for additional works. Everything was going to be fine. We queried it, and then we went and checked. We went and we took a tape measure out, and we measured how far 14.7 metres from the existing boundary was. And to our surprise, we found fresh survey bolts bang in the middle of the form trail at both ends of that 106 metres. When we spoke to TMR about that, that was definitely not consistent with their understanding of what was going to happen. Again, council officers said to us, no, it's not going to be a problem, don't worry about it. I have consistently asked since then, where is the boundary going? What's happening to the rail trail? To no avail. And I found the answer very recently on QGlobe. When you have a look at where that boundary goes, it is bang down the middle of the rail trail surface. But again, I was given platitudes that we would still have connectivity. Connectivity means you can go from point A to point B, like all we needed was a footpath. Quite frankly, if we wanted a footpath, we'd ride down the main road. Trail users are looking for an experience, they are not looking for connectivity. Trailheads are important. We run other activities there. They're the beautiful places. They're the places we're putting our effort into tree planting and revegetation. That's where we gather. We don't know that there's any benefit to the community or to TRC of relinquishing this part of their lease. There is no financial gain. We don't know the lease period. We've been asking and asking, how long is this for? I was initially told it's only a lease, don't worry, it's only temporary. I was also told by TMR that once the lease is established, that the applicant can go for the purchase of the property. And to me, that makes pretty good business sense. If you've made an investment in a piece of property that you want to own it. We still don't know of any remediation of the trail should this lease portion be relinquished. There will be an impact on user groups. There's already an impact on audax rights. No, we haven't used it last Christmas because there wasn't enough room and there was a fencing and works going on. But for the last number of years, we've used it twice yearly as a start and finish location. We've had between 100 and 250 cyclists use this area. We haven't had a problem with parking. We know how to walk down the road and park. The toilets in the main street are open. We don't need access to the Tolga pub toilets, but the publican had kindly provided that. And we do go back and we do drink beer. We don't drink tea and kombucha after our rides. We enjoy a good beer, and the publican knew that and welcomed us with open arms. Red Earth runners use this very area every third week for their training sessions and continue to do so even when machinery was parked on the area. We've been using it at least twice a year for large group gatherings since 2017, and we have photographic evidence. And these riders then come back. Tolga Hotel has become something of a local watering hole. But how it looks now is that the trail is narrowed, there is no vegetation, there's no direct access, our rail barriers have disappeared, and the trail surface is eroding. We were told that it will not significantly affect the existing nature, character and amenity of the existing hotel. Instead, it's going to enhance the existing aspect. Well, we're not quite sure how that happens with a car park and a toilet block and a lot of concrete. This development, we wouldn't consider to be a bike-friendly business, and that's what we say. We are not the enemy. We would actually like a really bike-friendly pub. And in 2014, a number of local organisations in Far North Queensland, including Tableland Futures Corporation, put out a publication, Cyclists Welcome, How to Engage with Tropical North Queensland Emerging Cycle Tourism Market. They talked about bike racks, outdoor areas, grassed areas, a scenic outlook, safe and direct access from the trail and a separation from vehicle movement, none of which will be provided by a 41 vehicle car park. And it works. This example is of the Lyndall Hotel on the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail. They have done all of those things. They have outdoor areas, grassed areas, bike racks, and their comment on good old Facebook, I think we need a bigger bike rack. It makes economic sense to welcome cyclists to a pub on the rail trail. We question why we need a 41 vehicle car park on the rail trail. I understood the actual requirement was for 24 parking spaces for approval for that size building. I'm willing to hear, and some of that objection was raised why it needed to be larger. I do understand there's other options. I understand that a car park is now needed, that these buildings are being constructed on the premises and that they need these car parks to get the approvals to operate as a food and beverage outlet. But there are other options. There's resumption land nearby, and overhead recent photos will show that that's already being used by people who are working on the site, and vehicle access is happening on that eastern side of the site. There's also a car park just up the road that TRC is making for the users of rail trails and the general community. It's within reasonable walking distance from the pub. There's plenty of car parking in the area, otherwise we risk having a concrete corridor from one end of Tolga to the other. I'd also like to raise concerns about the internal process that's happened. The applicant has said it's been a long and arduous 18 months. From what I can see, the normal internal process is that once an applicant makes their inquiry to the TRC department, that inquiry is circulated to all the relevant departments within TRC for their comment. And those departments should correctly check on their policies, the existing projects, any conflicts, and return that information to the initiating department before they give a response to the external agency. Well, apart from commenting that it seems to have happened pretty darn quickly and easily compared to my experience of working on community projects on community land, I think there have been a few hiccups. Once the inquiry was made, it seemed like it moved fairly quickly to discussions between TMR and TRC that the sublease application would be likely to be approved. This opened the path for negotiations to be undertaken between the applicant and TMR regarding the sublease. By the time the community found out that this was underway, those negotiations were basically concluded. In the interim, or somewhere around there, work was undertaken by the applicant on the site, and then somewhere in there, and to my mind, by mid-January, the community became broadly aware, and some other TRC departments became aware when the development application was there. Now, when I say some other departments, I believe that the Community Services Department were among the last to hear of this development, and in fact found out about it in January through sources external to the council.
Can I just say, this speculation about what happens in turning this is not appropriate from either side.
The role of the Community Services Department is extremely important for the community. It's the frequent starting point for community contact. They're the ones that are skilled in community consultation and know what's going on about community groups, activities, clubs. They've been involved in the rail trail for over 20 years. They're involved in cycling strategy development, the rail trail strategy, the Tablelands 2030 plan. We've been told that someone was informed within community services, but no one can tell us who.
Mr. Mayor, I think if I may suggest, Mr. Mayor, that this part of the deputation is, as the CEO said, is starting to be highly critical of our internal processes, and I don't think that's appropriate. I think I would suggest you draw Ms. Stitcher back to her deputation in relation to the rail trail and this piece of land.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Councillor Clifton. I think that's fair comment. And look, we've both deputations have been quite critical of council. I was conscious that I wanted to give Gail Stitcher the equivalent time to the proponents. But Councillor Clifton makes a good point that, and the CEO makes a good point that some of these matters are really not appropriate for this forum. So if Gail, if you can keep on track with your presentation and yeah, proceed that way. Thank you.
I think the process is equally important to the parcel of land.
Yeah.
And I think community members feel the same way, that there has been an erosion of working relationships. If things are being said out of line, we're sad, we're frightened, we're confused, and I personally have had threats of legal action unless I withdraw my submission. We were told that the only option we had for community input was that if the TRC doesn't approve the development application, and the only grounds we had for objection was the consistency with the planning scheme, the development problems and the impact on the surrounding land, that we had no option to object to the sublease. So we read the council officer's report and, well, it's brief, probably amongst the briefest I've seen. And I agree with the applicant that it does acknowledge a lot of issues and give a lot of airplay to them. There were 50 or more community objections received. But despite all that, and despite not showing any community benefit, it recommends approving the sublease subject to community consultation. I think it's pretty fair to say that the applicant and the community are not getting on too well. So leaving that in the hands of the community, I think, is fraught. There's no indication of who's going to do it, how, when, or what the process is going to be. And it appears to us that it's divesting TRC of responsibility for the community consultation and giving it all to the community, but with no authority to carry out. What we would like to see is that the application for the sublease and the development application at this point be rejected, and begin the process properly to include proper community consultation by PRC and the applicant with reference to the current and future use. And again, I underline, we are not anti-pub, we are not anti-development. Let's have a look at examples of other rail trail developments that can work to everyone's benefit. And my other comments, as have been pointed out, are probably not appropriate to use. So what some of us want, you know, doesn't always seem to go that you don't know what it's got to you've gone. Some of us would like it to go back. We know it can't go back to what we had. Some of us would like to plan up heavily. We don't have a consistent community view on this. We need to gain everyone's view on it and work together. We know that we could have this. There's other examples out there of developments on rail trails, subleases over rail trails that benefit everybody. But this is not what we want. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, councillors, I think that takes us to, we can move on to 11.1 on the agenda. (11.1) Appointment of Acting Chief Executive Officer. Do I have a mover and seconder for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hodge is moving and Councillor Bilney is seconding. Councillor Hodge.
Well, fine, no need to talk about it. I think it's just quite common sense, and it puts the process in place. So just in case the acting the CEO is away or he's not well, it'll go back to you to appoint the acting CEO. So I'm fine with the report.
Thank you, Councillor Bilney.
Through the chair, likewise, I think it's self-explanatory. The benefits by formalising this arrangement is evident.
Thank you. Councillors, any other comment? Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried. Thank you. Item 12.1. J.E. Disley, MCU, Channel Road, Walkerman. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hodge is moving and Councillor Clifton is seconding. Councillor Hodge. Okay,
everything's fairly well explained here. There's only one point that we really need to get some advice on and some explanations, and that is in the conditions 4.1, the access easement. There's just some confusion. I'd like to send it back to the officers to explain the differences between, or what the applicant says they do not want that in there, and if it is to be put in there, that the applicant or their application will be removed and it won't go ahead. So we just need to have that clarification on why and the relevant response from some, so it's a little bit clear as mud at the moment. So we can clear that point up.
Yeah, thanks, Tudor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor, for raising this issue. Indeed, this is one of the key issues in front of us today with this application. Sunwater is a referral agency under planning legislation, and we received one submission from them, which is treated like a properly made submission. It refers to the access to the lot, which crosses the irrigation channel. There were some options which are detailed in the report, which were looked at, and eventually our recommendation in the report, which Sunwater is agreeable to, is that the applicant enter in discussions with Sunwater and obtain an easement over the land for access purposes to the satisfaction of Sunwater. The key issue is the bridge in there and who takes ownership of the bridge and its maintenance and related matters. So my understanding is that the bridges were the responsibility of Sunwater, but Sunwater is in possession of legal advice suggesting, and I'm quoting Sunwater here, that upon a development application being received and being processed for the land, which is the case here, then they have no longer an obligation to provide this access. So
I'll just come in at one point, if you don't mind. The application is an extension of an original approval. I think it's 28, but now it goes, it's applying for an extra 194 extra people. So when the original approval was given, the access was fine. There was no need for a lease or whatever like that. But now, because there's this new MCU for an additional 194, it changes everything. Seems to change everything. That's where the confusion for me is. I guess that's many years ago when they had the original approval, and things change, policies change. And that's one it's a bit hard to understand.
It is, Councillor, I agree with that, and it is to a great extent a matter between the applicant and Sunwater. And from the discussions that we had, the applicant is actually making quite a point that his change of use doesn't imply anything which is necessarily requiring an upgrade of the respective bridge, because the bridge is already cutting agricultural traffic to the likes of semis and 42 tons and more. So what they put in won't require a bridge upgrade in any particular way. So what the applicant is, my understanding of what the applicant is saying here is what has changed. Sunwater has stated that they have a legal opinion which says that things have changed. However, Sunwater being a referral agency here, it is common practice to include the requirements of that agency, and that's what councillors have done in here. Being a submitter, Sunwater can appeal a decision, and so can the applicant for that matter. We can eliminate the easement condition out of the report, and but we have out of precaution and based on how we usually deal with these things, we have included it in the existing recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yep. Councillor Clifton. Yep.
So the nub of it is that Sunwater owns the existing bridge into this property where the material change of use is sought, but they refuse to accept that there can be development, and that they refuse to accept any responsibility for the bridge that they own. Is that a direct summary? Is that a summary of it? Sunwater in this letter here, I see, they do not, it says, do not wish to be responsible for the proposed crossing. It is their bridge, isn't it? We don't own it. The landholder doesn't own it. Sunwater owns it. It's a bridge across the canal, and they don't accept responsibility for that bridge. That's what they're saying.
So if I may, through the chair, the channel was constructed somewhere in the 60s, and it seems that tenure was provided to Sunwater at that time over the channel alignment. We have no records of understanding as to what the arrangements were when that happened back then between the original landowners and Sunwater. So we probably can't really answer who owns the bridge and what the arrangements were that underpinned it. However, the bridge is over the channel and is located on Sunwater land and is definitely not owned by council.
Yeah. So we're facing the situation, in summary, is that we're being asked, we've got a forward-looking agricultural enterprise owned within TRC, looking to develop agriculture increasingly in a modern way, and the Sunwater won't acknowledge the bridge for their access to it, and won't acknowledge responsibility for it. That seems to me to be really a reprehensible stance on behalf of Sunwater, which we can't resolve here today, but I cannot understand it. Cannot understand.
Yeah, Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. Look, I'm of a mind to support the applicant's request to remove those two conditions, 4.2 and 4.6. 4.2 being the access, and as has been highlighted here, Sunwater are trying to get out of to carry out maintenance on all these ageing assets, ageing bridges across their channel. Now, this application refers to an extension of existing use. It's already rural workers accommodation out there. The application is just there to increase the number of rural workers accommodated on the site. So it's all about the use of the land. In my mind, access shouldn't be coming into it. There's already a lawful access to the property over land that we don't control. So why are we addressing access issues? It's not our issue. We should be looking at the application with its merit on the use of the land that we have control over. So the use is currently being used for workers' accommodation. The application is to increase that use. Doesn't talk anything about the buses. The buses aren't going to get any bigger. The access requirements aren't going to change. It's just accessing the property. The only thing that might change is a few more traffic movements into the property. So again, I'd be looking to amend the officer's recommendation to remove 4.2 and 4.6.
Through the chair.
4.1.
4.1, sorry.
I'll allow the general manager to just explain the actual situation, and I'm not sure that we're actually achieving the outcome of benefiting the applicant with what we're proposing. But could you just address that, General Manager?
Yes, through the chair, thank you. So my understanding was that the original response of Sunwater implied that council would take control and open road over the channel and over the bridge. So the subsequent discussion with Sunwater was to clarify that that would not be council's preference, and therefore the recommendation was included to require the easement to be given. So realistically, if this condition is removed, that basically leaves an impasse between the developer and Sunwater, where Sunwater potentially could still hold on to their view that they don't own that bridge and following the development. We don't know where that leads, but that will potentially leave the property without legal access. And council, is probably as a service provider at last resort, may then be required to open road reserve. With that in mind, council would have a requirement to open road reserve, but we don't have a requirement to provide any level of service to that property. So we would likely then, because, well, I'm foreseeing the council is not of mind of taking over an asset that was constructed in the 1960s against the design standards of the time, or whatever they were, and potentially be left with a bridge that actually doesn't meet current standards and requirements for the use that is proposed, and a significant upgrade bill potentially. So we're by including this condition, we're trying to protect the interest of council and also the interest of the applicant, because they might be left without legal access to their property.
And Sunwater's standing in the application, their legal standing in the application is what?
So
referral agency.
Referral agency, yes.
And
So if we don't have something in that addresses the issues that they've raised, then not a competent decision.
Yes, they can appeal our decision, they have some grounds to say.
So if we leave 4.1 in, that gives them the right to appeal it.
Yep.
Take it from there.
We take it out there, the right to
yeah.
appeal. I don't know why we would be seeking to invite appeals or
No.
So.
Up to them.
Councillor Cardew?
Look, by taking this condition out, 4.1, I still don't believe that we're in a position to deal with the access, because we don't control the land that the access is over. I can't see Sunwater appealing this if we do take it out. There's hundreds of these accesses across the channel, both in this shire and in Mareeba Shire. There's hundreds of them accessing farmland on the other side of the channel. So, for them to appeal this on grounds that they don't want to maintain their asset, I mean, there's hundreds of these things. I just think I think it's a very low risk if we take this out.
Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, I'm reluctant to remove it unless we leave this on the table and get some proper legal or more legal advice on this, because I don't want to take the risk of, on one hand we're saying, if we remove it, we may end up with the liability of the breach. Yeah, I don't want to take the risk of that.
Councillor Cardew?
Okay, so if we don't take a risk, right, and we maintain this condition in here, right, and then the applicant withdraws its application, then we're doing a number of things. We're removing the ability to provide workers' accommodation that is really, really sought after in our area, because we can't get people to work to pick the fruit or to pick our crops that are the farm are growing. So that's going to take that, and that's something that we've been asking for a long, long time. It's an absolute necessity to be able to attract rural workers and to be able to house them. So if we knock this back and the application falls over, then we're going to end up with all these people at the top end of Robert Street, which we've been given some indication from the applicant to suggest that if this goes ahead and they can put all their workers down there, they may not go ahead with the development up at the top end of Robert Street. So there's going to be consequences that are more detrimental to us than worrying about whether Sunwater is going to take legal action over an access issue that we have no control over. So just keep that in mind as well.
Councillor Hayden, thanks.
Because it's the development application, I've known many development applications that have to do their access road. And it could be kilometres long, and I don't think this is any different to any other development application, and I would be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Cardew?
Yeah, look, take on board what Councillor Hayden has said, and she's quite right. But the access is existing. There's no change to the access. There's no proposed change to the access. The access is already there. We're not talking about upgrading access or whatever else. It's already existing. All it's doing is increasing the use of the land. Now, the access to the land is already there.
Just for my clarification, councillors, can I just go back to Mark's commentary before, Mark, could you restate the risk to council if 4.1 is deleted? I understood you to say that the risk to council is that we will then be required to provide a road reserve or something similar. Can you just explain the risk if 4.1's gone? What's the risk to council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely. So, my understanding from the initial submission by Sunwater is that they're of the view that once this development is approved, they no longer have a requirement to provide access to that property over their land. So I don't know what action they would take, but that is the clear impression I get from their submission, and that they actually want us to condition that we open the road to allow that access to that property. So under the relevant acts, we do have a requirement as a local government to provide legal access to individual properties. So if for whatever reason, under the pre-existing arrangement between Sunwater and the landowner, Sunwater has the entitlement to basically close that bridge and say you no longer have access to that property, then as a matter of course, we as a local government have then the requirement to provide legal access. So we would have to open the road.
Right. So basically what you're saying is if we were to remove clause 4.1 and then Sunwater decided to play hardball and say, well, they're not going to allow the developer to use that access, then it would come back to us. In that event, if things broke down between Sunwater and the developer, it would then come back to us that we'd have to provide road access. That's what the risk is.
That is my understanding of the legislative requirement on council. I do emphasise I'm not a lawyer, so if you want to seek legal confirmation of that, I can fully understand that, but that's my understanding of the obligation of councils to provide legal access.
Councillor Clifton? Councillor Clifton?
I mean, seek a little bit of further clarity on my mind. Currently, legal access exists.
So,
so that what the suggestion, the comment is that if we approve this, then our action will has the chance of extinguishing that legal access provided by Sunwater.
Through the chair. So, based on the submission from Sunwater, I deduct that they have the belief that they can that they're no longer bound by whatever arrangement they had when they initially installed the channel and the bridge. We're not privy to that legal advice. We don't know what their arrangements are that were established back in the day. But obviously from their letter, it seems that they are of the opinion that they can remove that the development potentially overrides the requirements for them to provide access over the channel, which then would require us to do that because properties have a legal right to have legal access. And I'm looking at Phil, if you want to add to that, maybe. Or...
Sorry, I wasn't.
Yeah. So, Councillor Cardew.
Yeah. Look, if we take this out and Sunwater challenges us, I mean, I don't think they would, but if they do, or if they take away the rights of legal access to the property, I mean, I can't see them doing that either. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, and then just to say all this does happen, if we are required to put in a road access to that property because the Sunwater objections were upheld or whatever, we still have the ability to provide that access, but not maintain any services or any bridges or anything in that access. Is that right, Mark?
So, as I stated before, where we have the obligation to provide legal access to a property, we don't necessarily have an obligation to provide any level of service. However, if the applicant then would apply for an operational works permit to construct an access road, including a bridge, on the road reserve, then that asset becomes council's. And we then have an obligation to at least provide safe access. We still, through the budgeting process, council can decide how much money they spend on that asset, but it will have to be maintained at least so that the applicant has access to their property in a safe manner.
Councillor Hodge. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, thank you. Look, because we haven't got, the legal advice in front of us to really make an informed decision, I think it needs to be put in there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but once this is done, they can come back and renegotiate any decision. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct in the way I understand your question, yes.
Okay. So I don't have any intention of changing my resolution, unless the landscaping one we can talk about, but I think the risk is too great, and we can get further legal advice later on if they want to negotiate, come back and negotiate to the table. So,
Councillors, anyone else like to? So we've got a motion on the table. We've got Councillor Hodge has moved and Councillor Clifton has seconded. Those in favour of the motion. Okay, so that's carried. Would you like yours recorded against Councillor Cardew?
Yes, please.
Councillor Clifton, did you vote against? Yes. Okay, so Councillor Cardew and Clifton against. Thank you. Okay, item 12.2. Disposal of surplus land and buildings, asset disposal. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? 12.2. Councillor Cardew and Councillor Wilkes? Yep, thank you. Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I don't have a problem with any of this officer's report or the recommendation. I think all the places that are listed in the report for disposal, it's just a list, and as per what the recommendation says, it's just the assets are identified for investigation, including community consultation. So we've already workshopped this. We've identified, things that we need to look at, or assets that need to be looked at. There's a list here. I don't think we really need to include any more or take any off, because there's no decision here today other than to have a list that the officers can take out to the community to gauge their interest in these matters. The only thing that I might suggest is that in addition to the recommendation, that we have an additional clause in there where it says something along the lines of community consultation for all assets be undertaken as a collective, as opposed to one-on-one.
So Councillor Cardew, just on a procedural matter, you've actually moved the officer's recommendation. That's been moved and seconded, so that's the one we're talking about at the moment. So you're talking about an amendment.
Well, a minor amendment, if it doesn't trigger a further motion, we might ask the CEO to provide some clarity on that.
Well, we've got a mover and a seconder of the current recommendation. So that's what we've got at the moment. If you're flagging you'd like to amend that, we need to know what the amendment is.
Well, the amendment is just that with the one sentence at the end.
You mean at the beginning of the officer's recommendation then?
No, at the end of the officer's recommendation, include another dot point where it says community consultation for all assets to be undertaken, as a collective.
As a collective, yeah.
Councillor Billney?
Yeah, look, through the mayor, I don't agree with that at all. The motion is what's on there, and that's what I think we should be voting upon. I've got a very different view on whether we should be doing things based on collectively or individual. I think each facility has its own benefit to the community and should be adjudged accordingly. So I do not wish to see that changed whatsoever.
Should to deletions, Mr Mayor, that anything that was to be deleted could obviously occur post the consultation processes. Post this process, we get to the end of it and go, well, no, there's strong community interest in retaining that asset, so that may be the outcome. In terms of other properties that you may wish to add from time to time, then they can just be done through officers, and we could add those to the list and look at them, or bring a separate report to council if we thought it was warranted. So it's a starting point. We need to move forward with these the consultation processes. A little bit like you, Councillor Billney, I think there's a degree of individual negotiation that needs to, or consultation that needs to happen in respect of each of those premises, rather than a blanket approach, because there will be different users and different interest groups who may feel that they were not adequately consulted if it's just a broad process. But that's a question of how we go about it and how we view each one.
Councillor Wiltz?
Yeah, just following on from what the CEO just indicated. A lot of these premises that are named here, obviously, like this list isn't exhaustive. It's the items or the building subject of this report are spread across the Shire. So I think it'd be unfair on a lot of the organisations should we just use a blanket approach. Different user groups, totally different locality. Yeah, so I think the officer's recommendation should stand.
Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Hayden and then Councillor Clifton.
Okay, so I have no problem with the recommendation, but if I look at the list of potential disposal of surplus land and buildings up for investigation, it appears only 3 divisions are targeted, which have been identified as the 3 major centres of TRC. Now, if council goes down this path, it does not mean the outcome of the community consultation that assets will be disposed of. And councillors need to remember that some of these groups have somewhere else to go. And buildings in smaller communities could be added to this list at any time.
Thanks, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Clifton?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I have a lot of sympathy with Councillor Cardew's potential, with his view about doing it collectively, but rather than amend the motion, I would rather see that taken on as an operational matter. My view there is that, and we can't, so what I'm saying now should only be regarded as advisory, but I don't see that there's a problem with commencing a collective engagement process and asking for people to demonstrate their interest. There may be some assets on there which have no community interest. There may be half a dozen on there which have no community interest and do not garner a comment from the community in the initial process. That then would chart operationally which way we went. So whilst I don't support the complete collective approach, I do support commencing it in operationally in a collective sense to see what the community says.
Thanks, Councillor Clifton. Okay, Councillor Billney?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important to reiterate about disposal of council assets. It's this, my understanding is that council is committed to the long-term delivery of quality facilities flexible, that meets the needs of the broader community, but we also need to know and recognise the fact that they've got to be sustainable, and that they do meet the future needs in the next 20, 40, 50 years, but by also being able to balancing the ability of the community to pay for those facilities. So we've got 17 listed on this report. It was an initial list of 25. Over the last two years, we've reduced that to 8 from 25 back to 17. So that's a reduction of 8. So we've done very well. We're moving in the right direction. I just want to publicly say to community, just because these halls are listed doesn't automatically mean they're going to go. So we are going to look at it and have a measured, balanced approach in every particular facility, because everyone has a specific use in my mind.
Yes, good point of clarification, Councillor Bilney. Thank you. So, councillors, I think we'll put this one to the vote. We've got a mover. Councillor Cardew's moved. Councillor Wiltz has seconded the officer's recommendation. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think we'll do one more, councillors, then we'll break for morning tea. So we'll go on to 12.3 and then we'll take a break. So 12.3, Safer Buildings Queensland combustible claddings, request for authorisation to prosecute. Could I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Cardew moving, a seconder. Councillor Wiltz seconding. Councillor Cardew?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm happy with the recommendation. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Some time ago, when all this came about, it all came about from the fires down in Sydney. So I was involved in doing some of the inspections for TRC back in the day when this all came about, and I don't think there's too many in our area. I can't recall any in our area, especially in the council owns, that has this combustible materials in it. So I don't have a problem with this. If the QBCC want to prosecute, then there we go. So it'll take the onus off us.
Thank you. Councillor Wiltz? Councillor Wiltz?
I'd ask Cheetah to just give us an overview.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Mayor, what I wanted in the first instance to mention is that this was a very late report. We only received correspondence on the 16th of March from the Commissioner. I wrote this report, I think, the following day. Basically, since then I've received information from the Commissioner as well with regards to an alternative wording for the resolution. It doesn't change at all the intent of the resolution. The only thing it does is it puts it in proper legal jargon for better description, and that's what is currently on the screen, and it's slightly different to the proposed resolution on the agenda.
That's it up there, is it?
It is the one up there, yes. It does say the same in different words, councillors. And we were approached by the Commissioner of QBCC. They did realize that when Part 4A was put in order to deal with combustible claddings as a matter of urgency, given that the fires that happened and the fires that had happened in Britain as well, they omitted the fact, they didn't realize the fact that there are no powers given directly to QBCC by means of the Building Act. Hence, they would like that corrected. They cannot prosecute, so they have to be either local government or an agent of local government. And I also realized that that period of time they have available in order to chase people up have not provided very important safety information with regards to this ending very soon. Hence, this urgent request from them. Any prosecution will be carried out by QBCC, not by council. Council is not involved in any particular way. this whole thing is only designed to correct an error in the legislation.
Thanks, Tudor. Councillor Cardew.
Sorry, with the overarching aim, Mr Mayor, to secure public safety in respect of this product.
Yep. Councillor Cardew.
I don't understand that amended resolution. It says that pursuant to the Act, Building Act, Council hereby authorises the Commissioner of the Queensland Building Commission to make complaints under the Justices Act. What does that mean?
So through the chair, that is the exact method that they need to apply for them to actually be able to prosecute under the Building Act, is to be able to make a complaint under the Justices Act. They can only make a complaint under the Justices Act either by the council or through delegation from the council to do that. So that's why, and as you indicated, the request came very late. We immediately responded to them and asked them for their preferred wording to actually make sure that the resolution by council is actually effective for them. And unfortunately, they came back with the wording that they needed after we had already added the report to the council agenda. But this is actually correct, also in line with what they've written in their letter. They need council to make a delegation to allow them to make a complaint under the Justices Act. Otherwise, the initial resolution potentially doesn't actually give them the correct delegation to prosecute.
So
Councillor Cardew.
Just to clarify, if we approve that there, then there's no onus on council to do any prosecuting. QBCC going to do it.
No, so that doesn't change. Council is not involved.
Yeah. Just in terms of delegations, if we don't get the wording absolutely as it should be, then any prosecution, then the first thing that a barrister would do is say the delegation from council wasn't competent. So that is the exact wording that is needed for them to pursue what we've already spoken about, and that is prosecuting anyone who doesn't want to remove the cladding, make their building safe or safer.
Mr Mayor?
Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, I'm happy to amend my motion to include the amended resolution.
Okay, Councillor Wiltz, are you happy to support the amended motion? Yes. Okay. Okay, councillors, those in favour of the amended motion, thank you. Thank you, carried. Okay, councillors, we might take a 15-minute break. So if we can just adjourn the meeting for 15 minutes. Thank you.
Rod, can you hear us now? Can you unmute yourself?
Yep, can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, well, welcome back everyone, thank you. We'll reconvene and we're up to item 13.1. Financial report, February 2022. Could I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Bilney moving and Councillor Hodge seconding. Councillor Bilney?
Through the chair, I've only got one real just clarification. If I can ask the manager of finance on page 134, the statement of financial position states the period ending 28th of February 2022. Just want to get a bit of clarity about the trade and other receivables current. It says current year to date 28,654,099. And yet the previous year it says 5,793,093. So there's a big difference in those figures. If perhaps you could explain that to me, what that means.
Absolutely. So thank you through the chair. So the balance sheet or the statement of financial position reflects the February result for the 21-22 year. What it's actually comparing against though the previous year is the previous year end of year result. So the result as at 30th of June. So it is a little bit confusing and I'll correct that for next month's report to make that clearer. But what we're seeing in the trading under receivables for the February period is the issuing of our rates notices. So our second rate notice issued for this financial year. But it's being compared against the final result that we were at 30 June and last financial year. So next month I'll clarify those report headings.
So the current year to date is a full 12-month period?
The year to date is to
February. Yeah, so that's only for the eight-month fiscal period.
Correct. Okay. Whereas the other is 12 months.
I appreciate that. And just for anyone looking at these reports, just that.
Yeah, it is I'll
I appreciate that. Thank you. Other than that, that's fine.
Thanks, Councillor Bilney. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just going to the financial statement at a glance, we're tracking well on budget. Revenue is up 3.1%, expenses are down 2.73%. So we're tracking well to budget, even though I wasn't real happy with budget, but that's another day. Only one question is in our sundry. Sundry debtors, in the 90 days, someone knows us $1,030,000. But I'm sure there's an explanation for that. And,
yep. So that is the works that we do for our main roads. So we're just in the middle of some negotiations between the reports that we present to them. But there is no doubt that they will be paid. The work has been completed. It's just a reporting clarification that we need to finalise.
Yeah, that's it, Mr. Mayor, for me.
Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Clifton.
No, I have some questions about capital projects in the ELT report. Just for clarification, for me, page 150 and 151, item number 452, 454, 461. I'm plighting my own troth as a divisional councillor, and in each of those they were line budget items in the approved budget and exist in the approved budget for this year. And I noticed here that there is no year-to-date budget. Now that means no year-to-date budget spent. It doesn't mean there's no year-to-date budget, if I might just get that clarified.
So, yeah, thank you for that, through the chair. So basically, when we budget for our expenditure of capital works, we phase that out over the 12 months in the year. So this basically just means that there's zero expenditure, but we also had not expected that we would be spending money on it because the works are scheduled for the latter part of the year. That's what it means. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to clarify it so that any constituent who might be viewing it thinks that, oh, the money has disappeared. No, it doesn't mean that. Thank you.
Just not the scheduled construction in the last quarter.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillors, any more questions on the financial report? Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried, thank you. Item 13.2, 2022-2023 fees and charges. Can I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Can I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Bilney moving. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilts. Thank you. Councillor Bilney?
No, nothing from me. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillors? Councillor Hodge.
Yes, as in a previous email, I did speak the other day to officers and councillors about having a bond for our halls where there is alcohol consumed, and I sent round the email where the damage to Merrylands Hall at the end of November 2021. I guess I think General Manager Hillary did say that when they sign the form, there is a provision there that we can get the money back if there's damages. But what I want to know is, in this particular case, even though you did say the scale was great, you know, there was a lot of time by the Afton Chase Society to remove all the glass from the Taekwondo's equipment. They smashed all the fluoros, and you saw where all the damage they did to the toilets and all that. Did we get the money back from that person who hired that hall?
Well, it's not my place to raise questions of order. This is about the fees and charges. To deal with that as a separate matter under business without notice. I do know that you wish to reinstate the bond, but I don't think that conversation around that particular matter is part of this report.
Yeah, fair enough. No, that's look, I was thinking the same thing, and I thought it was related to bond, but we might bring that up business without notice, Councillor Hodge, if you want to raise a discussion about that particular event. Councillor Hodge, did you want to raise the bond issue as part of this discussion?
Yes, I would like to reinstate the bond of $4 million for the hire of our facilities where there is alcohol consumed.
Councillor Bilney.
How do we police whether people are going to have alcohol at one of our facilities? I mean, do we specifically ask on the application when they go for tenure of a facility, are you going to consume alcohol? Do we do that at present? Sorry, yeah.
It's not a requirement to.
No. So yeah, look, it's just a ticker box. Doesn't mean that there's alcohol going to be there or not. So I don't see the imposition of a bond in very, very limited circumstances to be an issue, particularly when the past experience of having a bond took 6 to 8 weeks to get a refund. And a lot of these little organisations that's shelling out this bond, they need that money back in their kitty for their day-to-day stuff. And I just think it's a bit onerous, to be honest.
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor Bilney. Look, and I recall we had this discussion, yeah, I can't remember when, a year ago. But and the reason that we moved away from a bond was just the amount of work it takes, the amount of time it takes for the people to get the bond back. A lot of these are not-for-profit groups. We can't respond to every event that happens with a change in policy. You know, we've got a policy there. There's going to be some wins for council. There's going to be some losses for council, but we've got a policy there. We should stick to it. We can't change the policy every time there's an event. If it becomes an epidemic of events, well, we can look at the policy, but we can't change our policy for you know, occurrences. So look, we have got a mover and a seconder of 13.2. If there's no further discussion, yes, Councillor Hodge.
Can I just have one more point, if you don't mind, and that'll do. So I'll just say one thing. Isn't fair. If people damage our halls, the ratepayer funds it, the repairs. That's all I want to say. So I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Clifton, are you going to respond to that? Yes.
Yes, I am. In the sense that I would hope that the CEO would note the concern about the selection of people who use our premises from time to time, and I would hope that there would be an ability operationally for judgment to be exercised. So if a school group wants to take on a hall and have an end of the year party, if the flashing light, I would expect that our staff would have enough discretion to say ooh, and take steps. And I would ask the CEO could bear in mind the discussion from an operational point of view.
Noted. Thanks, Councillor.
Okay, sorry, Erica.
Sorry, through the chair. If I may just make a note that under our current policy and current practices, we do have the opportunity to invoice for damages if they occur.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried. Thank you. 13.3, committee representation. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Clifton, moving. A seconder. Councillor Hodge. Councillor Clifton moving. Councillor Hodge. Councillor Clifton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This this report by council officers stems from a resolution that was passed at the previous ordinary council meeting following our grassroots review. All it seeks to do is to bring up to date the advisory committees that we have, to revise, to examine the terms of reference for them. Some of them may be appropriate to have and others may not be appropriate to have. This is a list recommended by our officers, and also, if you'll note on page 205 at number 3 and 4 that the officers have recommended the rescission of 2 of the committees as not having a place anymore. So I would ask during the discussion whether councillors feel that some of these could be removed or some could be included before we consider the motion. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Clifton. Councillors, any response to Councillor Clifton there?
I had one question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
To the CEO, we have something like 42 odd committees, etc. The fact that if something is not included, some of them are advisory committees within the meaning of the Act. Others ones are simply citizen council sort forums, not to demean them, but does this mean by passing these ones that we're not, these are the only council advisory committees?
That's in terms of the legislation that a council council created committees, if you like, as opposed to committees in which we might be represented.
Yeah, not
That's
those
a
ones.
distinction, but we're not dealing with those in this report.
No.
General Manager wanted to add to that?
No, I think through the chair, just confirming the request, the original request identified specific committees, but officers undertook a review of all of those committees just to have them complete.
Okay, so basically, just to finally clarify, if it's a natural, a council advisory committee, the current, when we've resolved this resolution, if we resolve it favourably, then these are the only advisory committees the council has.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on this one, councillors? Okay, we have a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation for 13.3. Those in favour? Carried, thank you. 13.4, Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, 2 March 2022. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Wilts moving and Councillor Hodge seconding. Councillor Wilts?
It's fairly self-explanatory and straightforward. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone like to talk to this one?
No,
Those
it's all
in
fine. Councillor Clifton and myself are doing a great job on this committee, so it's all good.
Thank you.
Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried, thank you. 13.5, CPR Lost Giants of the Atherton Tablelands 1A report. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Do I have Councillor Wilts is moving and Councillor Hayden seconding. Councillor Wilts?
Yes, I'll ask for Cheryl Lee to give us a briefing on this, please.
Thank you.
The ATF, through the Community Projects Request process, the RC policy, has requested for this project. The project is it's part A of a larger project, a $10 to $15 million project. This project is, as I said, part A, to be established in Ravensstone, and the capital for this project is to be funded externally by the applicant, which is again the Atherton Tableland Foundation, with council taking on the whole of life costs, which is in the report as well. The recommendation from the officers, as this aligns with the Ravensstone Master Plan and also our arts policy, recommendation is that we support the program. This program would be funded out of the CPR council budget, and the allocation would, if endorsed, be transferred over to council for the whole of life cost.
Thanks very much. Councillor Clifton.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. On page 271, and I think it's an amendment, I'll just check it. It talks about site plan and whole of life costings brackets $15,480 for annual maintenance.
Sorry, that's for the whole of life costings for the 25 years.
Yep.
That was correct.
Yeah, that was corrected. This in my paper. It's not. Thank you.
Very good. Councillors, any? Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I support the communities, any community organisation who wants to do things and make the surrounding amenity of our town better and beautifuler and whatever else. one thing I don't support is accepting whole of life costs or maintenance costs up front immediately after it's installed. I mean, it's all nice for these things to go in, but then it then puts an onus, it puts a cost on all ratepayers for the maintenance and disposal of these things at a later date. So, whilst I'm happy to have these artefacts and public art and everything established around the areas, I think up front there should be some discussion with the people who want to put them in there and give them some responsibility to maintain it for at least some period of time, as opposed to us jumping straight in, taking ownership of it and putting an impost on all ratepayers up front. So I think there should be some further negotiations with public organisations who wants to put these things in to get some indication of what they're prepared to do as far as maintenance on their asset that they're providing us. So that's my take on that.
Thanks, Councillor Kaji. Councillor Hayden.
So Radenso, we're so lucky to be the first town identified to be delivered a vision for lost giants and the Atherton Tablelands Ice Age to climate change. And if successful, this is a great opportunity to create a globally recognised art, science and educational tourist attraction, and $15,480 for a whole of life is a small price to pay for the attraction you will get to the local area.
Thanks, Councillor Hayden. Councillors, Councillor Bilney.
Yeah, through the Mayor, look, I concur with what Councillor Hayden's just said. I think $450 a year maintenance cost is really insignificant for the potential economic development that it will bring to the community. It's going to be a bit of something to come and see, and potentially down the track, if they do more of these things, it will form part of the trail. Correct me if I'm wrong, maintenance costs can't be part of grant funding. Is that correct? Ongoing maintenance costs?
So through the chair, my understanding for this particular grant is the case of it.
So yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hodge.
Just before we put this to bed, I just want to just make a in the report, because this report will stay on file on page 278. Just to correct the figures there, where it says that the maintenance will be $15,480, leaving a remaining budget of $84,520. That we can get that fixed, but it will be only $450 taken off that maintenance budget.
Sorry.
Is that correct?
Sorry, through the chair, if I can just respond to that.
Yes, please.
The way that council have decided to manage allocation of funds for community projects is that there is an amount of 100,000 nominated in the budget, and that when councillors are considering projects, community projects to be funded, they wanted to consider the whole of life costs, so they're acknowledging the full amount that is being committed to, whether it's in this or future years, so that the commitment total in any 12-month period is no more than 100,000. So even though those costs are spread out over a long period of time, it is still appropriate that it's being reflected as reduce the full amount, reducing the available 100,000, because that is how councillors wanted to consider the commitment that was being made.
Is that $100,000 a yearly amount?
If councillors continue to adopt a budget of that amount, that is what was originally decided by councillors, to allocate an amount of $100,000 to be available for commitments around community projects.
Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Again, I reiterate, I don't have any problem with community organisations wanting to provide council with these sorts of public art. I think it's great. But what I don't want to see is we approve this, I believe that we'll be setting a precedence where there's absolutely no need for anyone to try and negotiate with these community groups to undertake at least some maintenance up front. You know, why do we have to have this clause in the recommendation where we are automatically putting our hand up front saying, oh, yeah, we'll accept it and we'll do the maintenance on it as well? Why don't you try to negotiate with the people wanting to supply these things to try and get them to look after their public art instead of council, instead of ratepayers? So I just think, you know, we're setting a bit of a precedent here by having that word in the recommendation where we're going to take responsibility straight up front. I think it's too much. I think it's it'll set a precedence for other things. And, you know, we put my hand in the pocket all the time.
Sorry, if I could just respond through the chair, just for clarity again, that the responsibility will always fall back on council to undertake maintenance or other activities, whatever the community projects are. Ultimately, regardless of a conversation that might occur in any particular case, the onus is always on council to ensure that those installations remain safe and appropriately maintained and so forth. So regardless of any agreement or conversation that might take place, it's responsible of council to note what that cost is and to be aware that that cost may fall on council if something happens, if those community groups don't continue or something else happens, the installations are still there, they still need to be maintained. So that's the intent of including those whole of life costings.
Can I respond?
Yeah, Councillor Cardew. Councillor Cardew, yep.
Yeah, thanks. And I recognise all that, GM Hillary. That's fine, but all I'm saying is if we've got a document here, then we're bound by it. It can be an operational thing or a procedural thing to negotiate with community groups who want to provide us with public art. We can talk to them up front early on if there's a process in place. We don't have to document in the council resolution that we're going to undertake maintenance on everything that's given to us. So I just think that there's an opportunity there to try and look at ways of working with community groups who want to provide us with public art. Look at ways of involving them, not cutting them off as soon as they hand over. It involves them on an ongoing process, so that and they take pride in that. You know, we see lots of organisations like Lions and things doing community things, cleaning things, painting things. You know, why do we have to accept or say up front that we'll take on maintenance? But I just don't see. I think it's setting a precedence.
Thanks, Councillor Cardew. Councillor Clifton.
Yeah, on page 278, we currently put aside $100,000 per annum for the purposes of community project requests. If we take this decision, including the whole of life costing, suddenly we've reduced that figure down to 84,000. We took 2 or 3 other decisions of this nature. Suddenly we'll end up with, it's a different way of accounting, but we'll end up with much less than we anticipated we'd have. We'd have to make a subsequent allocation. And I'm wondering whether, so 5 such projects as this, suddenly wouldn't have any community project monies left to be able to distribute to other smaller organisations, etc., etc., etc. I realise that the reality of it is the same. It's just a way of accounting and bringing it to our notice, which is sort of hits us in the eye and think, ooh. And so I therefore support Councillor Cardew's approach. If we do this a couple more times, we're taking funds away from the community projects, monies which are otherwise be available for a whole lot of self-help organisations. I support Councillor Cardew's approach.
Thanks, Councillor Clifton. Councillor Billneck.
Through the Mayor. Look, I would argue we've set aside $100,000 in our budget, so we're prepared to spend that. I mean, if we're not prepared to spend it, why have a budget allocation? It does not make sense to me. This will reset itself as of the 1st of July. You know, I just, yeah.
Cheryl Eve, sorry.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just go back to the whole reason this was set up it came from ad hoc community projects coming into council. Council wanted rigour around the assessment of these projects and that they were assessed in comparison across all the projects that come in, apples for apples. And that wasn't happening. So we were getting projects from all areas of council externally. We were then bringing them to council because we didn't have a budget. Council then asked me to develop a policy, which we have done in consultation with you. Subsequent to that, we actually had, if you recall, the red chair in Malanda, and we didn't have any finance behind that to support that project. Whilst we thought it was a good project, we still needed to come back to council. To do that, it took us 6 to 8 weeks to get that report to council, which council felt was quite a considerable amount of time, given the amount of money that was being requested. Subsequent workshops, and we workshopped that as a case study, and we developed a policy that council was comfortable with. Part of that policy was the allocation of $100,000 for community projects for 12 months. And part of that discussion was, once that allocation is spent in that year, like our community grant program, it's then any projects are put on hold until the following allocation if council so desires. So that was the premise of how it was set up. The policy was written and how the process has been established within council. This is one of the first ones to come to council. We do have, I know in Shane's area, a few more projects sitting to be considered. The due diligence is being done behind that now as we speak. But this was the agreed process. Councillor, to the whole of life costs, it was really clear at our workshop that council wanted the whole of life costs to have oversight of the project and budgeting requirements, and that's why they're included up front. I do take on board the maintenance and working with community groups. In this particular instance, the maintenance are very low. They're bronze statues, and it is $450 a year. The committee is committed to going in and keeping those clean and wiping them down. But the committee is a committee, and they may, you know, through time and longevity, they may not be the same people on that committee. So it's very difficult to commit a committee when there's different committees turning over all the time.
Thanks, Shirley. Councillor Cardew, last one.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I'd like to move an amended motion to remove item 4 from the officer's recommendation.
I'm happy to
Hang on, we've got a motion already that's been moved by Councillor Wilts and seconded by Councillor Hayden. So that's the motion we're dealing with at the moment. So that we've got an active motion. So I'd suggest that we deal with the motion on the table first. So you can flag, Councillor Cardew, that you've got an alternative motion, but we won't be dealing with that until we deal with the motion that's on the table. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I just want to make something clear. Maybe Manager Finance can tell me this. Technically, okay, we've created this budget and there's $15,000 that's come off it, right? Technically, but it's just sitting there somewhere in the balance sheet, I assume. But in real terms, $450 will be spent every year on maintenance.
Correct. Yes.
Through our maintenance budget.
Yes, correct. Yes.
Brilliant.
The work is done
No,
elsewhere.
can't put any.
We're not going to spend it this year. We're going to put it in the bank and spend it over the next years.
Yeah, so, yeah, so it's not the 15,000 gets spent now.
Councillor Clifton.
I'm not sure whether I would call this a point of order, Mr. Mayor, but given that Councillor Cardew suggested an amendment to the motion, would it be appropriate for you to seek whether the mover and the seconder would allow that amendment to be brought into play.
Is it an amendment, councillor Cardew, or an alternative motion?
An amendment. Amendment to strike out item 4.
Gary?
Could I potentially provide some clarity there? I think to the extent that deletion of part 4 changes the intent of the motion significantly, I wouldn't view it as an amendment. I would think that being subsequently deleted would be a separate matter if this motion fails, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, look, we've got a bit of clarity there from the CEO on councillor Cardew's proposed changes. So I'd suggest we put the existing motion that's got a mover and a seconder to the vote. Those in favour of the existing motion? Carried. Would you like them recorded against, councillor Cardew and councillor Clifton?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay. Councillors, can we just do an adjournment for a few minutes? I think this next item might take a little while. I'm just going to do a nature stop. So we've got about 3 minutes if everyone would like to take a break for 3 minutes.
Come on down.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, everyone. Is everyone back? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So we'll reconvene. Item 13.6, disposal of rail truck.
Sorry,
Yes?
Mr. Mayor, could I just seek the council's leave to make a short comment?
Yeah, of course. So disposal of rail trail land. Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to place on the record that I have absolute confidence that everyone involved in this process has done their job without bias, and there are no conflicts of interest within the staff in relation to this matter. The view that's been reached has been reached without prejudice or bias of any description. We do have some different wording to Mr. Mayor in relation to the suggested recommendation.
Yeah, thanks, CEO.
That is deletion of part 4 and amendment to part 3. Councillors can all see that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, thanks. So what I'm suggesting that we do to get this one underway, councillors, is I'd like a mover and a seconder to open the report for discussion. As the CEO has just said, they've got, officers have made some amendments to the officer's recommendation, which we're probably just getting to see now. So perhaps if we can have a mover and a seconder to open the report for discussion, then we can look at changes that have been made and have a broader discussion. So Councillor Cardew, are you moving? Councillor Cardew's moving. Councillor Hodge is seconding. Can we vote to have the report open for discussion? Okay. Sorry, I just can't see Councillor Hayden for some reason now. But yes, thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, so we've got the report open for discussion. Perhaps we might start with the amended officer's recommendation. Is that going to you, Phil?
Look, I'm happy to speak to that, Mr. Mayor. Following, and I won't go into detail, that'll come out during the report, the reasons for that amendment. So we've had some feedback from our planners, and to give effect of what the intention of that third item, or that third and fourth item, it was essentially to ensure that we don't dispose of an asset, or council is not disposing of an asset without some reasonable assurance that the planning approval is going to take effect. And there's some case law to sort of support the notion that we shouldn't preempt the outcome of a further approval, and they can be subject to it on each other and conditional upon each other. So that's really the intention around the amendment of that, and I think it was possibly a little bit cumbersome in what it was trying to seek in the sense that it was requiring satisfaction of certain conditions, which I think just confused matters. So we decided that it was best to remove that altogether and amend the third item just to make sure that we've got an effective development permit in play. I'm happy to go on, Mr. Mayor, if you like.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, just one thing. I just want to go and read it because I can't see it from here, if you don't mind. Won't take us.
Can you? Is it possible to email it to the council? We will email that to you, council.
Yes, no.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, can we just read that out for everyone?
Yeah, look, that will be good.
Number 4 is deleted. Yeah.
Yep. So if Phil, I might get you to talk through that because I'm having trouble here getting the amended resolution up on my screen. So I just can't see it at the moment, but I'll keep trying. But if you don't mind talking to the amendments, please, Phil.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So the fourth item was compliance with planning conditions, save for those conditions that relate to the execution of a sublease or other agreement with the Department of Transport and Main Roads and completing any operational works on the land required by an approval. Now, yeah, what they were seeking to do was make sure that there was a certain level of completion of those conditions. However, after discussion with our planning team, following the publication of the agenda, it was decided that the approval contemplated in item 3 would facilitate the transfer of that to go forward if council are of the mind to approve this disposal of the interest. So it was considered to be unnecessary to have that extra one in there, and the amendment to item 3 was included just because an approval may be granted, however it may not take effect until certain matters are resolved. So if there was an appeal, for example, it would be stayed for a period until that becomes effective. So the intention of that was that we've got an effective development permit allowing the works to go ahead, because otherwise if we've disposed of an interest in land, and in the event that doesn't proceed, we've disposed of an asset of councils without any planning development taking place. So it's more just a logical step, and there's argument on which order things have got to occur, but our view is that they can be conditional upon each other without sort of preempting the outcome of the other. So hence why it's structured in that way.
Okay, councillors, look, there's probably quite a bit to discuss here. So I just want to be consistent in how each of us expresses our particular views or concerns, so that we all get a fair crack through this discussion. Is there a councillor who'd like to get the ball rolling? Okay, Councillor Clifton can go first.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a couple of points of clarification that I'd like to address to Phil. On page 292, halfway down the second paragraph, it says the initial proposal submitted by the developer was for the entire width of the rail corridor, which was refused by council. I don't recall there ever being that matter ever being put before council. I think your advice as to about the nature of that decision.
Yep. Thank you, councillor. So through the chair, effectively and if I can just go back a little bit, the council has a couple of functions in this matter. Its function as the sublessee through DTMR under a perpetual lease in the rail corridor, so we're a landholder, if you like, and on that land we have some community infrastructure known as the rail trail, so it's no secrets there. The other function council's got is the assessment manager under a planning application. So there's two distinct matters there. I guess at the precursor to the planning application, and this predates sort of the formal pre-lodgement discussions, but I think one of the very early iterations was there was a map, and whether it was intended to be the full width or not, I'm not sure. But that was submitted to the asset custodian. So the asset custodian in this instance was the manager of strategic assets, and that's a usual process in terms of providing owner's consent under the planning process. So we haven't actually made any commitment to dispose of land or otherwise, but it's more about what we propose to bring to council for consideration, and given that would have effectively broken the continuity of the trail, it was considered not to be something that we'd want to entertain. That's not what's for discussion anyway, because we're well past that. That's purely for the purposes of background, so that we've sort of moved past that. And the advice that we got back when we consulted regarding the owner's consent under the lease for the landowner to facilitate the planning application was to the effect that, provided it doesn't materially impact on council's public infrastructure, we wouldn't object to providing owner's consent. And then things have transpired from there, which I'm happy to get to as a discussion.
I'm just, what you're effectively saying is that decision was an appropriately taken delegated decision by council officers.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
Councillor.
and that's all I'm trying to get to. The second one that I had questions about was when it goes on to say, council also indicated that the preferred approach is not to enter into a sublease, but deal directly with the state. Now, inferredly in that is another delegated officer decision, is that because that matter has never been, the choice between a sublease and discussions with the state has never, to my recollection, been put to council. So that's another delegated decision?
Through the chair, yes, councillor. So one of the early proposals, and this was in discussion with DTMR, so there's any number of ways we could have structured the tenure to allow this application to proceed. What was initially proposed by DTMR was a suggestion that we should consider a sublease, which would involve council subleasing its interest to the proponent. We identified some issues in the sense that from an ongoing planning compliance, our interest in that land expires in 2046. So council would be, would be at the mercy, I suppose, of the state, and in the unlikely event that that lease wasn't renewed, we'd have a situation where you'd have a potential planning non-compliance, albeit it's probably unlikely. Even though it would run with the land, the owner of the hotel at that time in 2046 would need to have tenure to be able to, facilitate the parking requirements to be on site. So we sort of said, well, there's an unnecessary step in there where council's still involved in this equation, where the state have powers to enter into agreements of their own volition. And so we landed on the proposal where we surrender the necessary proportion out of that parcel of land, and basically just rely on council's function as a planning body to assess whatever the arrangement between the state and the developer is. So that was sort of the process of how we landed with this proposed, I guess, tenure arrangement to facilitate the planning application going ahead.
I suppose that the number of my inquiry is, at that stage, we the council, through appropriate delegations and through appropriate negotiations, took the decision to go down a path of notionally giving away a community asset. And the point I want to make is that I don't recall that being discussed with council. I'm not talking about the deals and the machinations and all the appropriate things that have got to go on. For that matter, this matter has never been brought before council before, has it?
In terms of the decision to make the disposal under 236, no, that was this first time.
So Councillor Clifton, you've clarified those couple of points. Did you have a view that you would like to express more broadly about the application or the report, I should say?
Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't. I do have a view, but I don't want it to be perceived as being critical of council practices or council officers. But I feel, because we've only seen these documents, because matters haven't been referred to us previously, and with the correct assumption that they've been delegated by council officers have been delegated to do it and have done appropriate things. We, though, I as a councillor, have not seen this level of documentation and others before. For example, I've not seen these kinds of documents before. We've never workshopped, and I have a strong feeling that I'm completely underdone in knowing about how to make a decision on this matter. Bearing in mind we are at the nub of it, dealing with commercial and development interests and community interests on the other hand, and they do not necessarily go hand in hand, as has been exampled in this case. So I'd like to have another say later on, Mr. Mayor, if I have, but yes, that's my strong feeling. I have a proposal to put, but I want to make sure everybody else has a chance to have a chat. Thank you.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we'll go. Councillor Wilkes can go next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have to echo the sentiments of Councillor Clifton. I too feel totally underdone here with the information that I have before me, and I'm not saying we've been given misinformation or lack of information. The information that we have got is overwhelming at this point in time, and it has been changing in the very recent past. I'm speaking with some of my colleagues. I'm fairly confident that I can say that some of them feel the same way. And to me, for clarity, I need further work on this. I'm not saying I support or reject the application, but to me, for clarity, I firmly believe that we need a further workshop before we can make a responsible decision.
Thanks, Councillor Wilts. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say straight off that I haven't got a problem with the officers. They've done their work and done their job. That is the role that we have given them under the delegation. So I don't question that. Now, going forward later on after this, if you think there needs to be changes to delegations, well, so be it. So be it. But that is for another day. So today we're here to assess and make a decision on this particular 13.6. I'm used to this sort of the way things work over the years with planning applications, so I'm used to it. I've gone out, I've inspected it. I understand the concerns of the cycle people, but in my view, as a councillor, I have to look past my nose and look at the benefits for the whole community and not just a certain group or some groups. And I know there is a concern about the width, but looking at the plans, the width we got here, I think it looks like it's about 12 something metres, but then there is the bollards and all of the plantations of the scrubs and all that, which I'm quite happy with. I do believe that all groups need to share. This is a particular great thing for everybody. The cyclists, walkers, I mean, people with the horses. So in my view, and I'm happy with it, I'm happy to support it, and I'm very happy now with the changes to the resolution, because that was making it very difficult for me to make a decision. And I understand the people who have got concerns with it, but at the end of the day, I look at the development through our economic proposals that we say to all the developers, we want you to develop here. I look at the overall position of development, where the jobs are created, and it's just a roll-on effect for me. So I understand it. I'm happy to support it at this point in time. Well, not this point in time, I am happy to support it. I'm prepared to stand up for what I believe in. And I think now with the corrections of the recommendations, and I'm glad I've seen the plans, because I went out and saw it, and yes, when you look at it, when you see it, it's in construction. But we have the plans here now to see what it looks like, and I'm led to believe that the rail trail itself will be extended to the west, so it's so everyone can use it, and it is still 15 to 16 metres wide. So I'm happy to support it.
Councillors, who would like to go next? Councillors? So, Councillor Kaju, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I agree just about entirely with everything that Councillor Hodge just said. We're here to progress development in our local government footprint. We try to assist developers where possible to develop things that are a benefit to our community. And I think this development is definitely a benefit to our community. The way that it's been brought about to this point in time don't necessarily agree with. I mean, for a developer who, to be quite blunt, should know better to start building works without any sort of approvals or the like, and then expect council to turn around and, you know, give certain things to pull them out of the poop, so to speak, then I'm not in favour of that at all. However, I do support developers doing this sort of thing to benefit our community, and we should be here to help where possible. With regards to some of the comments, and I'll just referring to a comment that Matt Enridex made earlier, and that's why I just made that statement. One of the statements that the Toro representative made, or Gail Stitcher made, about, you know, not knowing about this until public notification. Well, there's legislative requirements under the Planning Act for public notification, and from my understanding, the developer and council planning officers have complied with that to the full extent. So, you know, people are only privy to things once that process has evolved. Public notification process it's out there for all to see, and it's out there for everybody to make public comment on. I believe, how many submitters did we get? Well, that hasn't actually happened yet, have we?
So if I can, sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just on that point, the purpose of this report is not to consider the merits of the planning application. So that is to follow. So I'd just like to divorce that. I mean, while I acknowledge they're related, we just sort of need to be clear. The purpose of this report is to consider the disposal of a non-current asset to the state government.
That's fine. Thanks, Phil. So, look, like I said, I'm here to support community and developers and the like to achieve something that's benefit to the whole of the community, not just one particular group. And I think this, by allowing this development to go through, or allowing this piece of lands to be excised off the rail trail and to be put into the development, is a good, maybe not such a good thing, but it's going to assist the development, which is going to provide a community facility that we can all use. Noting that we don't actually own the land, and from the outset, I was of the belief that it should be a state matter. It's their land, they own it. They should be the ones deciding how it's used or cut up or what have you. So. Yeah, I suppose that given where we are at this point in time, I'll probably be supporting the amended officer's recommendation. The cycle comments about you know I think there's still plenty of land there for a cycle track. Well, there's miles of room. So I don't see the cycle fraternity being disadvantaged all that much. It's still going to be there, still a trail to ride and to use and do whatever. So I think it'll definitely beautify that area as well. With just looking at the drawings that have been provided to it, I think it looks quite good, to be honest with you, but and it does, like it was suggested earlier, that it takes the number of people up the main road there and puts it behind the facility, out of harm's way of traffic and the like. So yeah, anyway, that's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Kaju. So we've got Councillor Hayden and Councillor Bilney. Who would like to go next? Councillor Hayden.
So our economy and the economic and business development, I'll start again, shut up, Peter. Okay, our economy needs economic and business development, and council needs to assist in developing business capacity. And the car parks are required to service the development. Council also supports healthy, active and safe lifestyles, and we need spaces for community needs. But I think there is enough room for all users, and I'm sure the capacity for them to work together. So that's all I would say.
Thanks, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Bilney.
Yep, through the chair. A bit like Councillor Wilkes and Councillor Clifton, I'm conflicted by this. I struggle with this development in some regards, and what is the community benefit from it. I don't think we've actually explored the options available in this report, and for me, I can't make an informed decision on the current presentation.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bilney. All right, councillors, I'm going to say a few words now. I've got a slightly different take. The problem in front of us today is trying to determine how much land the pub really needs to be functional and operational, and that in my view is something that really needs to be measured. Whenever council surrenders its right to public land, if we're going to surrender that right, it should be in a really precise, measured way. My concern is that the developer has put this proposal in front of us, and we haven't fully explored whether what they put in front of us is the minimum amount of public land that they need to make their business operational. I mean, I absolutely love the Tolga pub. It'll be successful. We know it'll be successful, so we don't want the pub to fail, but it's absolutely imperative that whenever we give away our rights to public land, which is owned by all taxpayers, it should be precise. It should be measured. I don't think we should be giving any business enterprise, 1 square centimetre more than what they actually need. And I appreciate the rail trail is still going to be functional. It's going to be functional. There's plenty of room, but I can see council dealing with a lot more of these in the future, and this is this council's first test. So my view is just about the amount of land that is in the report. It's my personal view that it's. I'll come to you, Phil, if you want to talk. It's my personal view that we don't need to be surrendering that much land, and there's a whole bunch of issues. I don't understand why there's car parking on the rail trail in the application. I understand that council may have required that, but there's plenty of parking out the front of the pub. There's plenty of room out there for more parking. Why we had to put that parking on the rail trail and give up that public space. So look, I'm fully supportive of a compromised outcome that gives the pub the land that it needs to operate, but at the same time minimises the land that we surrender, because that rail trail is an asset, and over time it'll be chipped away here and there, and we've got to be careful that we don't devalue the very valuable asset that it is. It's going to be huge. It's popular now. It'll be huge in the future. It will be huge. So look, that's my view, and I might go to you now, Phil. I think you wanted to say something then.
Well, if I can just address that point, Mr. Mayor, in relation to the area sort, that's based on the designs, the preliminary parking and access designs that were included in the development application, I understand. So And I'm aware that our planning scheme requires a certain amount of on-site parking, so I believe that the developer's trying to achieve what's required by the planning scheme, and hence why we've included what's requested in the report for council's consideration. So that's representative of what is considered required by the developer, so hence that's what we've presented to council. So I don't know if that assists. There's other tenure options, I guess, that we've contemplated. We haven't canvassed them extensively in the report because we don't believe it's in council's interest. And that's looking at dedicating roads, which, addressing that encroachment issue that was raised earlier in one of the deputations, arguably is a local government road by definition under the Local Government Act. I won't get into that in any great detail, but given the public access that area on the rail trail and it's under council's control, there's an argument there that it's an informal road, if you like, not a dedicated road. And so the value in addressing the encroachment, I suppose, is to tidy up that uncertainty there in relation to the existing access. So I understand there's some good, potentially some good planning outcomes, but I don't want to delve into that in this report because that's something for consideration part of the planning report.
Just in relation to the car park, the planning scheme reflects Australian standards, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, look, and look, as a councillor, you're not privy to those internal machinations. You're not privy to the parking regulations. But sitting outside the process and having to make a decision on it, you can't help but feel that we could have minimised that footprint and still made the pub completely functional with some other, with some more thought. But that's not fully fair because I know there's been lots of thought by lots of people. It's as an elected person, everything you do is at a distance, and we all understand why that is. But at the end of the day, we have to make the decision, so we get jammed. We get jammed on these things, and then you've got to ask these questions and ask why, why wasn't more done in my view. All right, look, I think what we'll do is we'll every councillor can get another opportunity to talk again, and that might be our last opportunity to talk before we test a motion. Would you like to go first, Councillor Clifton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I didn't indicate what my broad view was before, except to clarify a couple of issues. I very much support development, and if this were put to the test as it currently is, to the vote, then I would be in full support of it. But having said that, I still feel that there's a whole range of matters that are underdone from my point of view, and I don't want to be in a position as a councillor making a decision where if the motion was lost there may be legal ramifications that we haven't discussed. And so depending upon advice from you and the CEO, I think would be a reasonable thing to do is to move into confidential and seek some legal advice from our advisors.
Thanks, Councillor Clifton. Would you like to say anything else at the moment?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilkes, would you like to go next?
No, thanks. I've said what I wanted to say.
Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've hit the nail right on the head. The developer has put the application in. The planning department says this is what you need under the Australian standards to provide all the car parking for that extension. So to quibble over 100 square metres in this, I think it is wrong, and I think we all know, they need the land. Okay, there is a bit of consensus about how much, but by doing so, as per the planning regulations and the standards, they need that particular land. So, with having said that, I'm going to prepare to move that the officer's recommendation be approved.
Councillor Cardew.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I don't share the view that we should be trying to, you know, the piece of land that we're talking about.
Speak up, please. Can't hear.
Sorry?
Speak up.
Sorry. Look, I don't share the view that the land, you know, the size of the parcel that's up for lease or what have you. It is what it is under the planning scheme. Our planning officers were presented with this application. They've given correct advice. The car parking is required under our planning scheme, and that's the amount of land that they need to operate. So if you go back and just dissect it a little, what are we trying to achieve? Okay, we're trying to achieve the ability for cyclists and walkers and the like to be able to use the rail trail. I don't think that's diminished, even though the size of the piece of land where they exit out onto Main Street in Talga may be a little bit diminished, but the use is still there in its entirety. The development of the Talga pub, even though it's come about in a way that wouldn't normally be acceptable, but we dealt with it. We've dealt with it. Our officers have tried to deal with it in a way that that supports development in our area, as we have asked them to do. So even though it's been messy in its application and the way it's all been carried out, I think, given the hand that our officers have been dealt with, they've dealt with it reasonably well. So again, I think in order to get this thing going ahead, and we need to make a decision today. We can't hold this thing up anymore. It's already been held up long enough. If we hold this up today, it's another 4 weeks before another council meeting, and the developer's just going to sit on their hands waiting for us again. So I think it needs to be decided today. There's been lots of anomalies. It's not the perfect scenario. It's not the perfect application, but this is what's in front of us. We need to deal with it. So I'll be going along with the officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Cardew. Councillor Hayden.
I just want to ask a question. So, just for a statement, first, council in previous applications have reduced the required number of car parks. So I was just wondering, is council in a position to be able to reduce the number of car parks and surrender, so less land is surrendered? I'm just curious, just asking questions.
Mark. Yes, Mark.
Yeah. I wanted to, I raised my hand a couple of times because I wanted to clarify the issue around the car parks. So we're dabbling now into the development approval and development application, but I think it's probably beneficial for this conversation. So the development application under the planning scheme requires, so this is the extension of the existing use, requires 34 on-site car parks if we apply the planning scheme. And I want to note that the plan that you have is not council's plan, that is the plan that the developer has submitted. So they're proposing 41 car parks. We're suggesting that that is a great thing because the original development of the pub, when it was first built, obviously did not cater for any on-site car parks. And under the current development scheme, they probably would need for the total about 102 spaces. To reduce the load of car parking on the wider Talga community and Main Street and allow sufficient parking for the other commercial developments within the area, it is, in officers' view, a great thing that the submission provides a little bit over what the actual additional development would require, so 41 against 34. If we would go back to the 34, and officers did look at potentially reducing the size of the area that they would utilise of the rail trail, the difference between creating 34 and 41 car parks is not substantial, because the majority of the area is just for the traffic movement on site. So, so you could potentially limit a little bit, but it wouldn't necessarily limit, especially what the width of the area required where you enter from Main Street, because that width is required to actually allow the movement through the bottle shop to safely occur. So I just wanted to provide that little bit of additional information, so there's a good understanding. It's not council's plans, it's not council's requirements to have 41 car parks. The official requirement is 34 under the planning scheme, but more car parks on site takes away pressure in the Main Street area, which in our view is quite substantial. Thank you. Does that answer your question as well, Councillor Hayden? Thank you.
So Councillor Bilney.
I really haven't got much more to add. As I said, the options available to both parties, I don't think have been sufficiently explored. So very, very difficult for me to make that informed decision.
Thanks, Councillor Bilney. Is that Councillor Clifton? No, Councillor Wills, sorry.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to go out of order there, Mr. Mayor. I take a little bit of objection to what Councillor Kaji said, that we've got to make a decision on it. We've got to make informed decisions. The time frame, to me, isn't the issue here. It's to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We've been given new information today from the GM. We've got different plans here to what council has submitted. It's underdone. To me, it's underdone. And I'm the same as Councillor Bilney. I'm not in a position to make a decision.
Thanks, Councillor Wills. I didn't ask if you were finished, Councillor Hayden. Did you finish your comments? No. Yes. So look, I also hold the view of Councillor Wills that, you know, we haven't got to make a decision today. Yes, we'd absolutely love to make a decision today, but it doesn't have to be made today. I feel well and truly underdone on this one. You know, just hearing Mark's comments there about the car parking, that there's actually 41 in the conceptual design, and we only require 34. Well, you know, if some of those parks are on the rail trail, they you know, perhaps they don't need to be there. But I mean, I commend the developer for you know, putting in as many parks as they've had, because they've gone above and beyond. But look, I feel like I'm completely underdone. I feel like I won't be able to support a recommendation today. I feel like I'm completely uncomfortable about that. So yeah, look, I won't be supporting the recommendation that's coming. That's all I've got to say. Councillor Hodge, I think we've got to the stage now where we put a motion up, unless the CEO. Look, oh, sorry. The other thing I was going to say, if in the event, and I'll let the CEO correct me, but in the event that a motion is put up and defeated, if the amended motion that we've just been given is put up and it's defeated, it's my understanding the developer has at least two options. One option is to take a legal route to challenge us through the courts. The other option is to come back and talk to council. That's my understanding. I'll take some advice from the CEO on that. Should the the motion be defeated?
In general terms, it'd be right.
I'm not sure on the timeline when I'm sure that it didn't.
We were planning to discuss the planning report in April.
We probably need to find out whether the result in it being
Through the CEO.
In broad terms, I'd suggest that's right. But this is an application under the Local Government Act. We're not dealing with the planning application per se.
No.
We're dealing with the application under the Local Government Act to relinquish an interest in land. It forms part of the development, but our decision today is whether you're prepared to hand that back to the state so that they can enter into a form of tenure with the applicant. That's all we're deciding. And my other question is, for those councillors who are uncomfortable, you need to articulate what it is that would make you comfortable with far more clarity than's been done today.
Yeah, I'll go to Phil, and then I'll respond to the CEO's question. Yes, Phil.
Just further to that, I mean, if this is held over for a future meeting, I know the other one's scheduled for April. There may be a way that we could try and get them concurrently at the same time for practical reasons. But
yeah, so I'll just respond to the CEO's question, then I'll come to you, Mark. Yes, so look, my biggest challenge, Gary, is just the size of the parcel. I know the rail trail is still functional, but it's just the size of the parcel that we surrender to go to private enterprise, albeit a private enterprise that we all really enjoy supporting. So that was my primary objection, was the size of the land parcel we're surrendering. And I'll go to you now, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for potentially for Phil. It seems to me that the information that the councillors are looking for is actually the information that is subject to the development application. So could potentially, if this was deferred, could we turn the sequence around and deal with the development application first and make that subject to this being also approved by council, because then they have the development application information before they deal with this matter. Because I think that's the difficulty for us. We can't put development related information in this report because then it's not actually subject to discussion at the moment.
Yeah, look,
Sorry?
If I can, through the chair.
Yes, I'll go to Phil.
This was the advice I got from the planners was the preferred order of events was to consider this matter first. I appreciate the difficulty, and there may be a way that we can potentially restructure some wording. Yeah, I guess the only issue is that if we're granting potentially a planning approval subject to the tenure issue, I guess if you like, then there's no actual proprietary right for the developer to do anything on that land. So that was why the tenure was seen to be required to be sorted out first, I guess. But we can look at the ordering and try and put them for each other.
Yeah, the CEO. Gary, did you want to say something?
We're just moving into areas we really need to consider more carefully than on the run today.
Councillor Hodge.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I think it's quite obvious that I think everyone's in support of this. Yep, we may squabble over 100, 200 square metres, but I think that's irrelevant now. And I think that I will formally move the officer's amended recommendation.
So Councillor Hodge is moving the amended recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cardew is seconding the amended recommendation. Do you have anything further to say, Councillor Hodge?
No, just that it's necessary really to make a decision. Make a decision here, hope it gets through, then we can move on to the MCU and get it done. So that's, I don't think there's any, I don't need to speak to it anymore. So
Councillors, who else would like to talk to this one? Okay, so we've got a motion, the amended motion is on the floor, moved Councillor Hodge, seconded Councillor Cardew. Those in favour of the recommendation, the amended recommendation? I can't see Councillor Hayden, so sorry, so we've got 4, so it's carried. It's carried. So Councillor Hayden, Councillor Clifton, Councillor Hodge, Councillor Cardew, carried. 4-3. Okay. I don't believe we have any notices of motion. Item 15, business without notice. Councillor Hodge. Councillor Hodge, did you have a business without motion notice? Or a business without notice? Did you have one, Councillor Hodge?
Well, I did want to bring up about the damage to the hall, but I think what I'll do now is just leave it at the moment. I'll leave it up to the CEO to make sure that our officers are aware what happens and take the appropriate response. So leave it in your hands.
Thanks. Business without notice. Any other business without notice? Okay. We've got our next meeting is Thursday, the 28th of April. I think we're done. There being no further business. Councillor Clifton.
I'm very sorry, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. I hope to be in Spain at the next ordinary council meeting. Should I, with respect, Mr. CEO, should I seek formal leave of absence now or later?
I'm taking it you don't think you can dial in successfully from Spain, or you just simply don't want to? Why are you enjoying it?
Maybe not riding a bike.
I will certainly try to dial in from Spain.
Yes, that's the appropriate process, Councillor Clifton, to seek leave. Seek leave of the council to be absent from the next ordinary council meeting.
Do I seek that leave here?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to seek leave of absence for the next ordinary council meeting. The communications in Spain. No, I'm sorry. Spain. I'm thinking my son. I'm not in Spain. I'm in Turkey. I'm a bit of a turkey myself. I'm so confused. I'm looking forward to the leave. So I seek leave of absence for the next meeting.
Yep. So Councillor Clifton is seeking leave of absence for the April meeting. Moved Councillor Clifton, seconded Councillor Hodge. Those in favour of granting leave for Councillor Clifton in April meeting? Carried.
I'm exercising a perceived conflict of interest of not voting here, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, and very disappointed that you won't be dialing in. Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you. We'll call it closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,
Rod, are you still there?
During the end.
You're like a ninja.